Coming up next, BookTV presents Afterwards, an hour-long program where we invite guest hosts to interview authors. This week, blogger Andrew Breitbart on his latest book, Righteous Indignation. The co-founder of the Huffington Post discusses his transformation from default liberal to self-described conservative cultural warrior, battling members of the mainstream media. He discusses the liberal bias he says pervades U.S. news outlets with talk radio and television host Armstrong Williams.
I'm Armstrong Williams. When I was asked to conduct this interview with Andrew Breitbart, someone that we've heard so much about, particularly over the last couple of years, whether it's Van Jones, whether it's Acorn, and the incredible role that he played into the revelation about the individuals and organizations. We all have our mixed emotions. And so when I finally received the book, Righteous Indignation, excuse me while I save the world, I really didn't know what to expect. But I must tell you, as someone who reads 2 books a week, it is a book that really impacted me. It really brought to realization the things that in my own life that I write about, that I've experienced and others have experienced. This is really a book that I strongly recommend, and I'm meeting Andrew Breitbart for the first time. I don't know him. This is our first encounter. But I will tell you, this is an incredible piece of work that I strongly recommend that you read, and you will understand why over the next hour. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
You grew up as a liberal. Your mentors were liberal. Talk about that moment in your life.
Well, you know, there's David Horowitz, who is the apostate who went from the left to the right, and he did so in an incredibly deep fashion, and he was an intellect. Well, I was the shallowest form of a liberal that you could possibly be. I grew up on the west side of Los Angeles, and my week in high school constituted going to about 3 or 4 movies a week, going out with my friends, watching television, going to a prep school, then going on to Tulane University. At no point in that entire experience in West Los Angeles were the executives of Hollywood, executives of Hollywood studios live, and actors and such, people within the industry. At no point during that period of time did I hear conservative thought. No, at no point did I have any opportunity to become anything other than liberal. So I considered myself a default liberal.
Let me interrupt you. In your book, you talk about one of those life-changing moments. You're watching the Justice Thomas, Anita Hill hearings. What happens to Andrew Breitbart?
Well, I just graduated from college, a place where it was like my bar mitzvah. I thought in my bar mitzvah that I would learn an education about Judaism, but I left feeling very empty because I just learned how to chant, and I felt I was open for a spiritual experience. I didn't get it. I felt the exact same way in college, where I was an American Studies major, and the stuff that I was reading was incomprehensible, and it was jargon. It was Noam Chomsky-like in its lack of comprehension to a person who doesn't understand that language, and it was demoralizing. And I graduated less skilled, less motivated, and I was a waiter. And
you robbed yourself.
I did. My education was a lack of an education, and so I was waiting tables right after graduating college, and I finished my lunch shift, and I'd go home.
And your friends would say to you, "Why are you doing this? You're so much better than this. What are you doing with your life?"
It was embarrassing.
Yes.
It was humiliating. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life, was the humiliation of having to work and to grind it, and the people that I was always looking up to and trying to impress were looking down on me, and I started to pay for my own shoes and started to...
But your parents cut you off.
My parents cut me off. It was brutal, and that's why I dedicated the book to my father, who cut me off, and Clarence Thomas at the same time. Both of their guidance in my life coincided.
That's a good segue back to the hearings.
Yeah. Well, I went from my wait job, and I started watching the hearings, wanting to root for the takedown of Clarence Thomas. I watched the television set, and the television set told me that this was a bad man, and the newspapers told me that he was a bad man. I remember Eleanor Smeal, I remember Patricia Schroeder walking up the steps, these ladies, and saying, this guy, we're going to take a stand against this guy for sexual harassment, serial sexual harassment. So I watched these hearings like a spectator who wanted to see somebody mauled, like lions mauling, Romans. And I watched day one, I watched day two, I watched the entire thing. I went from wanting him to be taken down to wondering, where's the beef? What's going on here? I don't understand what I'm watching here. I don't understand the color commentary that's on the screen where they're saying, oh, this is outrageous. And I didn't understand the bumper stickers that were going by me on the street saying, I believe Anita. I said, I believe Anita what? What's going on here? I don't understand what's going on here. Everything that I knew, everything that I picked up at college in my American Studies, cultural Marxist, oppressor oppressed, black people are always right, white people are always wrong. I didn't understand how Ted Kennedy, the Ted Kennedy of Chappaquiddick fame, how Howard Metzenbaum, Joe Biden, and a series of white privileged men could sit in judgment of this man who was the son of grandparents who were sharecroppers who raised him, and he went to Yale Law School. He did everything right, including allowing for Anita Hill to rise through the ranks of the legal profession, through jobs with him, where she never had a sexual relationship with him at all. He did nothing untoward, and she was party to this takedown. And I did not understand how it could be that these white people of privilege were attacking this black man who was in this historic position while the mainstream media took him down, while the NAACP and the Urban League and other black liberal leaders sat and seemed to relish this takedown.
Who were your mentor? You had this mentor at the time who we're going to get to later, who's brutally murdered. And you didn't know whether to cry for him or not, but you had this mentor, and it was along that time that you started questioning the indoctrination.
The smartest person I ever met was this guy named Mike, and I was delivering pizza in high school. And he was just different. He was alternative, and he was the smartest guy I ever knew. In hindsight, he wasn't the most ethical guy. He took the SATs for a bunch of my friends and got them 1600s. He was the smartest guy you could ever meet. And he dropped out of UC Santa Barbara. And while I was going to college, he was floundering and doing drugs. During the period of time that he was my mentor, he was taking me to alternative bookstores to read about left-wing ideas. He very much was into the class struggle. And when I started to have these epiphanies, when I started to get my job, as I was aspiring to be an intellect, as I was trying to understand his worldview, as I was trying to embrace the struggle, at a certain point, my dad said something that nobody told him is, you need to get a job, you need to clean up, you need to get your act together, you need to stop doing drugs. And so there was a certain point where I started to challenge my mentor. It wasn't that I felt that I was an intellect and that I was able to beat him at the game of SAT scores. I still was about 400 points below him on that level, but I started to gain the self-confidence and the self-respect that I could call him out on his misbehavior. And I just started to move away from this guy, and I got a phone call once as I was starting to move towards independence and away from this victimology that absolutely dominated this guy's consciousness. I got a phone call that he was murdered at a hotel room in Los Angeles, and I imagine that it was during a drug deal that went bad. And to this day, I think about how I've never cried about that.
But I was thinking about your parents, thinking about your story, the humiliation, and how you had to negotiate with the professor to give you a higher grade so you could graduate, because you realized that if you did not graduate, it would be humiliation, much more of your life would be lost. But then a friend of yours at Yale, who's very bright, called and said, Andrew Breitbart, I've got the perfect job for you.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, now that he was from Harvard.
Harvard.
He was an astrophysics major.
Right.
Seth Jacobson
Right.
was an astrophysics major who always cared for me. He always knew that in prep school that I was not going to be the A student, but that I was the class clown, but that I meant well. You know, even though that was how I skirted around my ADD and was able to maintain my place in an elite prep academy where everybody was Harvard, Stanford, Princeton bound. I knew that I was not going to be going to an elite academy. I didn't want to leave my friends, though. Seth knew my burden. Seth knew that
But you would visit him.
He visited me and he said, I need to take you on a walk. I said, no, just sit down. He goes, I need to take you on a walk. And he took me a walk around the street in Santa Monica, and he said, and this is when I was utterly wayward, right. And he said, I've seen your future. It's this thing called the internet. It works the way your brain works. And at that point, I had been diagnosed with adult ADD, and I had tried Ritalin for about a month, and I hated it. I felt hideous about it. I was trying to figure out how I could conform to the workplace where people have to work in cubicles. And I knew that I couldn't do that. I'd rather drive around LA listening to talk radio or music. And
but you left out. You had started listening to Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah,
by that time.
And well, anyway, he told me that I've seen the internet,
right.
I've seen the future, and I still to this day think that there's something almost too eerie about that, because he's right. The internet does work the way that my brain works.
But you explain how very difficult and arcane it was during the time, and how you had to figure out, and how slow it was. And then you had another epiphany. And then during that epiphany, another little blessing dropped your way. You received a call from someone that founded the Huffington Post, Ariana.
Oh, well, here's what happened. I actually was driving down. The street on Wilshire Boulevard once, and I'm not the most religious person. You heard my religious experience with my bar mitzvah, and I looked up to the sky and I said, God, please give me something to motivate me. I don't want to work in Hollywood. I don't like it. I need a mission in life. And the internet coincided with meeting Matt Drudge. Okay, I meet Matt Drudge almost right away, and I met him, and he was folding T-shirts at CBS at the time. I met him for about 4 hours, heard his worldview, heard what he felt about the media, heard what he felt about, in 1995, this nascent internet. And he left the place, drove off in like an old beat-up Hyundai. He was the manager at the CBS gift shop, and I said to my wife, that is a media visionary. He's going to change the world.
And he was your hero. You know, I want to go back and forth between the early years and some of the things that you write, because, you know, it's very interesting when you read someone's works, and when you're also in media, and you are familiar with the same story, and you read the facts in the person's book, you absolutely know that person is telling the truth, and he knows exactly what he was talking about. You know, I think one of the things that I like for you to spend some quality time talking about, which you talked about so eloquently in your book, is how Marxism and others, the Germans who had to exit Nazi Germany, who had to flee, how they came to the United States, how they were able to maneuver through education, how they were able to win praise from Time magazine, people like Saul Alinsky that you talked to about in great detail, who learned how to disguise his message, make it palatable for people to really want to talk about that, because I tell you, it was an absolutely astounding piece of work by you.
I was an American Studies major at Tulane, and I looked at those books when I got that I didn't completely read when I was at college. That's why I had to convince teachers to up my grades. I remember sitting in the classes thinking, what is she talking about? What is this professor talking about? It doesn't make sense to me. It didn't ring true in my bones. So when I got a survey in the mail asking me to grade my American Studies degree, I started to read those books, and I started to look up the names of those people, and I started to find out that they were part of this group called the Frankfurt School. It sounds weird to talk about the Frankfurt School. Most people have never heard of the Frankfurt School. But the Frankfurt School, I believe, are the origins of the mess we find ourselves in our culture right now. They are ultimately the architects of political correctness. They're the architects of multiculturalism. They're the architects of the destruction of American culture as we know it. The ones that said e pluribus unum is wrong. One from many is wrong. They were the ones that separated people by race and pitted people based upon, instead of the old economic Marxist argument of the haves versus the have-nots, and the class struggle based upon the peasants fighting off the owner
But
class.
you explained it even deeper, which I just drew my attention, in the fact that you already had a segment of people in this country, American blacks, who felt disenfranchised, who felt no love or particular loyalty to the country at the time because they were treated like slaves and chattel, and how they were able to come and raise them up, use their angst against this country to become sort of an ally, and even women from the women's suffrage to help their movement.
That's what they did. I was about to tell you that they translated economic Marxism to cultural Marxism to take advantage of black people who had been dispossessed, had been treated miserably, and to pit them against the white establishment. They did so also with the female establishment. They started to pit male versus female. They started to pit black versus white. This multiculturalist model turned in academia into the post-structuralism that you see. When your kid now goes to school, they have the opportunity of graduating with a queer studies degree. It's the building up of the victimology, an entire canon, an entire worldview for gays to believe that their entire path in life is to fight the establishment because the establishment is out to keep you down. They do it with blacks. They do it with Hispanics. And I'm telling you, it runs so contrary to what's in the core of what I am as a human being. And that's why I think that the Clarence Thomas hearings were so instrumental to me, because my entire sense of righteousness, my righteous indignance as a youth going through my conversion to conservatism, was based upon the inequities that I found in society. And when I discovered that the cultural left was not interested in creating equality in this country, that it wanted to pit blacks against whites in order to continue to climb, to get political power in this country, it was demoralizing to say the least. But once I figured it out, I decided to hell with it. That drive on Wilshire Boulevard that I had, where I said I want a mission in life. This is my goal in life. I want to destroy the institutional left. I want to make it so that black people in this country, Hispanics in this country, gays in this country have the freedom to believe in whatever political philosophy they want to believe in. That the Democratic Party is not the only place for them in this country. I believe in freedom. I believe in individuality to the core of my belief. And my fights out there are an attack on the NAACP. My attacks on the mainstream media are because I want to break down this artificial construct that pits Americans against each other.
Andrew Breitbart has written a fascinating, and I cannot emphasize it enough, piece of work, Righteous Indignation. Excuse me while I save the world. Another aspect of this book that it's riveting. And this aspect you will find to be shocking, painful, and truly disheartening. I remember this situation in Washington, D.C. that you write so vividly about, where members of the Black Caucus, John Lewis and others, said they were called the N-word, and we won't use that word on these airwaves, 11 times. And they
15 times.
15 times. Thank you for the correction. And it was a big story. The mainstream media ran with it, and I will tell you this. We had people there, and they said, Armstrong, it did not happen. They said, that did not happen. I said, no one would just make up that type of lie, and they said it did not happen. You have said in this book that there are those who are so bent on their agenda, so bent on dividing America and maintaining the perceived power that they have, that they will absolutely lie. And the media will brand this lie as the truth. And when they realize that it's not, they will never issue an apology or make amends for it.
This is what is at risk. I've been to 30 Tea Parties. 90% of them I've been invited by women, like Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann type women who pick me up in SUVs and take me into town and take me to the Tea Party. At those Tea Parties, the best speakers tend to be black conservatives.
But they're not the best speakers because they're black.
No, there's a reason why these two dynamics are happening.
You have to explain that.
Because men, because of political correctness, have become eunuchs. They're afraid of their shadows. The men who are running for the Republican ticket right now, who are white, are poll testing everything that comes out of their mouth. The wind. Herman Cain. I advocate a Herman Cain.
Godfather's piece out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Right. Allen West.
Out of Florida, elected to Congress.
Ticket. It would be.
Ticket for what?
Presidency. Because it would go straight after what I call the Democrat media
Before
complex.
we get to your, before we get to that, we've got to talk about
I know.
the fact,
what happened.
The lies.
Yes.
The lies.
What is at stake here is that blacks and women are creating the Tea Party, making it a place that, unlike the Republican Party, which is a toxic environment for blacks, and that's been the media's job for years, this is a place for blacks and women and Hispanics to go to recreate this country in its original constitutional vision. And that is the threat. That is why they had to fight. That's why they had to lie. That's why Nancy Pelosi...
But these are vicious lies.
These
are
what
happened is this.
Lies. What happened is this, and all I have to do is point to the architecture of Capitol Hill. There are tunnels between the Cannon House building and the Capitol, and that is how Nancy Pelosi travels. That's how she gets to her Capitol to vote. But on this day, when 40,000 taxpayers, Tea Party members, got out there to say, kill the bill, kill the bill.
What bill?
Obamacare. The day before Obamacare, there was a Tea Party rally there. And Nancy Pelosi orchestrated, I guarantee you, this is my positing this, but it's pretty much undeniable when you see what happened. We started to get word out that Barney Frank was called a negative word to describe a homosexual on Twitter. People wrote about it. Wow, I can't believe Barney Frank was called that by these Tea Party people. They've wanted to have bad behavior from the Tea Party. They've never gotten it, but this time they got it in one time. Somebody called Barney Frank the F word. And then we heard that black congressmen were called the N word. And next thing you know, the media picks up on it, and after 2 years of trying to find a racist incident or a bad incident,
they created one.
They created one. And
I want to say this. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Andrew Breitbart, to show his character and sincerity about this, offered members of the Congressional Black Caucus $100,000, $100,000 if they could prove in any instance where they were called the N-word.
Once, not 15 times. All I needed was once.
That's right,
on
once.
tape.
And what happened? They ignored your plea. $100,000.
Okay. But here's the thing. Here's what they were trying to do. Jesse Jackson Jr. was walking through the crowd trying to get a YouTube moment of somebody to say something. They could have walked underneath. The most unpopular members of the caucus walked through that crowd hoping to inspire a Tea Party person to incite something. How can I prove this? Nancy Pelosi, an hour after the alleged event where the N-word was hurled, that's a place where Congressman Carson said he thought that he was going to be hit by rocks. Nancy Pelosi walked through the same unsecure grounds with a massive gavel that was about 10 times the size of a gavel, with a grin on her face that was ear to ear. She wanted people to yell at her. She could have walked underneath. They were all looking for to incite the crowd. Sheila Jackson Lee was giving an obnoxious V sign from the Capitol building. They were trying to get the moment, and they didn't get it. Here's what Congressman Carson said, and it's on video. I was walking down the Cannon House steps. I was walking out of Cannon, and a mob of 400 people surrounded us. People started to hurl the N-word 15 times, he says. 15 times, 15 people. Kill the bill, N-word, he said. Kill the bill, N-word. He said it was a page out of a time machine. And then the police saw that we were in peril, and I'm paraphrasing him, but it's pretty much verbatim. And then the police saw us and took us out of safety. There is no police report that this happened. There is no police person. There is no audio of any of the 400 people coming forward to say that they heard it. Nobody, one person could have been there who could have been a liberal saying, I saw it. Nobody saw it. Congressman Carson created such an image that is not what Barney Frank said. One person said something. He created a vivid image that he described as a page out of a time machine. Those are his words. And when I heard his description and I juxtaposed it with what people were saying around there, like your friend said, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I was so upset that I offered $100,000. And guess what happened the next day? They shut up. They didn't think that there was an idiot like me who would take on race, that was a white guy. White guys are supposed to sit back and take the racism thing. And I'm like, no, I'm going to take this thing head on for Clarence Thomas. I'm going to take this thing head on. This is the battle of my life.
But what happened to you during the Bill Maher interview when you sold yourself out because you wanted to be a part of the club?
This was many years ago.
It happened.
I did, and a friend of mine saw that I went for the cheap laughs, and he said, why didn't you stand up for what you believe in? And
why didn't you?
Because it was my first time. It was my first round in the media, and I wanted to be liked.
You wanted to be accepted.
I wanted to be in the club.
Yes.
And then a friend told me after
he called you that night.
Everybody praised me and said, you were great. The Bill Maher people said, hey, we want to have you on again. I was like, hey.
Read the book to get the details.
Hey.
Yes.
And my friend said, hey, you were great on the show last night. Why didn't you stick up for what you believe in? And it haunted you. Yeah, for 2 years.
You were torn. But this was 2009 they invited you back?
That was 2004.
In 2009
they invited me like maybe 2007, 2008.
But that's okay.
2008. No, it was the first month of Obama. Right. It was the first month of Obama.
You went back on.
With Michael Eric Dyson, Professor Michael Eric Dyson, who is the embodiment. I'm telling you, it's almost out of a movie. It's cinematic. They usually have 3 panelists. They had 1 panelist.
And his job was?
Yeah, Professor Michael Eric Dyson is the cultural Marxist in the universities that I'm writing about in this book.
Now, he would not like you saying that about him.
Yeah.
He would say that's not true.
No, he didn't, because I actually started to cite the names. When he started to talk in this foreign tongue that sounded like iambic pentameter, he goes, the deconstruction of the bifurcation of the intellectual deconstruction. I remember, oh my God, that's what I heard in college that I didn't understand.
And an epiphany.
Yeah, he was caught up in a Noam Chomsky vernacular that I actually was afraid that Bill Maher would ask me, what did he just say? And I had no idea what he said. But his job there is to make me appear like I'm a racist. His job there was to call Rush Limbaugh a racist. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, stand up for what you believe in. And I started to fight back, and the crowd started booing me. In fact, it got to the point where the second I would get a syllable out, they started booing at the beginning of a sentence, to the point where Bill Maher had to stop them. He said, let him finish. Let him finish. And Michael Eric Dyson was doing everything he could to enable you. You don't understand the power structures that you're talking about, young man. You don't understand the power structures and the definition of what racism is. Racism is the cultural imposition of the dialectic. I don't know what he was talking about, but he was racism, and everywhere I go, racism. I'm like, racism is the cudgel that you guys use. This is where in America, this is un-American, where you're guilty and you don't even have the ability to disprove it.
But are you trying to convey to our listeners who are like I am enraptured with this discussion that it's only black men that play this race game, play this card, whip people to a frenzy, and just tell these lies?
No.
Do they have a monopoly on this?
No. Bill Maher just sits back and enjoys it and plays off of it, because that gets white guilt, as Shelby Steele will talk to you about, is played like a Stradivarius by the black community, by the liberal black community. And the people who will tell you about this the most are black conservatives. They go, yeah, and guess what we are? We're the Uncle Toms. Everybody is in their place.
Here's what people would not understand in this discussion today. People lie. They tell great lies. Many people are hurt. Sometimes people die. Why would a media like NBC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, USA Today, why would they be complicit and enablers in this very dangerous process for our country?
It is. It's pitting people against each other in the summer. That's when it was last year, the Congressional Black Caucus accusations. I'm like, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't pit us against each other. We can't afford it. We need to be united as a country. Why does the media go along with this?
Not just go along. Why won't they take them to task and say this is wrong and condemn it?
They won't, because I call it in the book, and I'm not trying to be cutesy here, but this is what I got from the Clarence Thomas hearings. Why did the NAACP sit on its hands? Why did not Katie Couric, but why did Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, and Peter Jennings and the New York Times play ball with this takedown of Clarence Thomas? I called it the Democrat media complex. A year later, after Clarence Thomas, Bill Clinton was named the standard bearer of the Democratic Party, when a year before they were telling us that a very low threshold of sexual harassment. Then you have Bill Clinton, whose behavior in the workplace was deplorable by even liberal now everybody understands.
But in your book you said they came to his rescue. They saved him.
They came to his rescue, and they admitted that they did it for abortion politics. They admit it now that they did it for abortion politics. That's why they went after Clarence Thomas. And so I call that the Democrat media complex.
Oh, no. You said much more in your book. You said they found an opening, in fact, in changing the conversation and manipulating the American people along words, what sex is, and this was really not about sex. It's not really about the job.
It's about the power.
It's about the power. Personal destruction.
Yeah, it was about the power structure within the workplace.
Yeah.
That you don't understand what it's like for a woman to exist in a workplace. You just don't understand. I believe, Anita, it was the same stuff that Michael Eric Dyson is talking about. It's the same stuff that Noam Chomsky is talking about. It's the same stuff that was taught in the 1940s and the 1950s. A bunch of European gentlemen who were cultural Marxists came here. They fled Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy to come to places like Southern California at the height of the Golden Age. And these men were depressed because what they saw was frivolity, consumerism, and their desires to create a serious utopia, an economic utopia, were hindered and hampered by what they saw was shallow consumerism. And they devised of a political, cultural, Marxist pathway that wasn't aiming straight at the politics, but was aiming at the culture. And they told their minions, go to the college campus, go to Hollywood. They took over Hollywood, and they took over the mainstream media. And they devised a false pretense called objective journalism. They're not objective journalists, because if you talk to a journalist over a cocktail in Washington or in New York City, you get down to the nitty-gritty of why these people got into journalism in the first place, and there are two answers they'll give you: social justice, economic equality. Their motivations were the civil rights movement. And so liberal white journalists are absolutely invested in the 1960s Urban League, Jesse Jackson, NAACP narrative, and conservative black people need to shut up.
Are you telling us, that this only exists with liberals and in the liberal establishment?
Are
you?
Are you talking about political correctness or control?
However you want to answer it. You know what I'm asking.
Well, here's what I enjoy about conservative media.
Are you saying me it doesn't exist with conservatives?
What
do they have exclusivity on this?
I really do believe that's the case. I believe that Rush Limbaugh, who they hate, is an affable guy. He's not trying to keep anybody down. And I believe that Rush Limbaugh does something that the New York Post, the New York Times writers and the Washington Post writers. She says, I'm biased. I'm coming to you with my point of view, and I'm not biased. I'm biased. I'm a conservative, and that's the difference between conservatives and liberals in the media. Liberals use their objectivity as their weaponry in order to cause people like me, Andrew Breitbart, Brentwood, default liberal. I just thought I was getting the truth. I thought I was getting the truth by these people.
You take me back to something else you said in your book, which I thought was an excellent point. And it was about transparency. You said the one thing that liberals do very well, like Obama. You said when Obama said, this is who I am, I smoked a little, I did a little this, I hung out with some bad characters, hey, that's my life story. And you said it took the wind out of the sails of those who do this gotcha politics. You talked about what Republicans should do is just disclose, be honest, and don't hide what they are, no matter what it is.
And go into Bill Maher's show or go on to MSNBC. Right. Let it hang out a little. All this poll testing is why they're eunuchs. It's why the left is able to control the narrative in a country that, according to Gallup, there's a 2-to-1 ratio of conservative to liberal. But we turn on the television set, you read the Washington Post, it's all the liberal narrative. And all of the conservatives are afraid of their shadows. They're afraid that their past is going to come out. They're going to be afraid that somebody's not going to like them or not invite them back on a certain comedy show.
Use Mark Foley as an example.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mark Foley, I mean, he was isolated the same reason why somebody who's black is isolated, because he was gay and a conservative. And I say this, I've supported, and I've gotten into trouble with this within some parts of the conservative movement. I supported Go Proud, which is a gay conservative organization. If being a conservative means saying that there can't be something called a gay conservative, then I'm not a conservative. And Mark Foley was targeted the way that a liberal closeted gay man or gay man wouldn't be, because the organized left has decided that it's its job to police its own, to target gay conservatives, to humiliate them as much as humanly possible as a form of political extortion. If you don't believe the way we believe, we're going to ruin your life.
You know, there's so much to this man, Andrew Breitbart, righteous indignation. Excuse me while I say the world. You know, I don't know if people know that now that you've become the genius of the internet, along with those that you admire so much, you were able to force the media to address Acorn's corruption. You brought to light Van Jones and other stories. And you did not do it because you had an angst, or you had you wanted to grind an axe against these people. You felt that there was wrongdoing, serious wrongdoing, and it should be reported.
Well, absolutely. Well, James O'Keefe and Hannah Giles came to me with a prepackaged.
Who are they?
They did the Acorn undercover work. James was the guy who does these type of things, and Hannah was the person who came up with this particular idea and who played the prostitute. I didn't target Acorn. Everybody says I targeted Acorn, but when they came to me with a bow, they video on it with a bow on top, and they asked, "Is this newsworthy?" And the answer.
And you also thought they could be setting you up. You were cautious. You were cautious.
Yeah. I was a little worried.
Yes.
I mean, when a person tells you that they do undercover video, you worry that they're doing undercover video. So I must say, at first I was worried, but then I started to see what we had here, which was multiple outlets of Acorn acquiescing to a pimp and a prostitute trying to set up a brothel for oftentimes 14-year-old girls, and they had service with a smile. I said, of course this is news, because if the same premise were to be done at Heritage, at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative foundation here in Washington, do you think that Katie Couric would say this isn't news?
How corrupt was Acorn?
I believe that they were incredibly corrupt, and that the information was hiding in plain sight, that the books had been written on Acorn, the articles had been written, but it didn't. a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's why Hollywood is so important. There would be a movie about Acorn, by the way, if this were a conservative institution. The videos were able to illuminate and create a depth of what had already previously been written and fallen upon deaf ears. So the video was a message. It was a shot across the bow to people out there in media land that for $1,400, that's how much it cost them for all of those offices. For $1,400, you could do an investigative project like that. Lila Rose, with her Planned Parenthood stuff, she comes to me and says, how can we effectively get this past the mainstream media's barrier that doesn't want to deal with corruption within Planned Parenthood? These people, these heroes of new journalism, do this for nothing, for nothing. Do you know what message that sends? It sends it out to millions of other people. If ABC, CBS, and NBC are going to ignore corruption, if they're going to ignore stories that hurt the liberal side, where they're not acting as a checks and balance against half of our culture, then the average American can do it him or herself. So the more that Katie Couric rejects this movement, the more that the movement is going to become a people's movement. The technology exists, the motivation exists.
But would Fox News have been so eager to air this video as they did the following morning when they called to say, we've got a problem? We did not air it on Fox and Friends. We aired it earlier. Would they have been so eager to air this had this been video about some conservative organization that they favored?
Well, I don't think the process would have gone through Fox News. Why would Fox News get it in a bow? They would have gone to ABC News, and in all likelihood, they would have gone to HBO and gotten $10 million for the rights to this and turned it into a series. They would be on the cover of Rolling Stone and all that type of stuff. They do things differently. The left does things differently and better.
I want to say something. Many of you watching this show, and some of you may not like what Andrew Breitbart is saying, but Andrew Breitbart is very honest, very revealing about himself in his book. He leaves no stones unturned. But you probably think that he's some rich, conservative person with all this money, that he can make things happen. I want you to know, and the book tells the story, you must go out and get this book. I'm urging them to get this book. It's a very good read. But you went to a donor who happened to be very wealthy, and she said, no, I can't do it. I want to stay private. I just cannot deal with this right now. But you went to your father, and you said to your father, Dad, you called it Dad, I need to borrow $25,000. You had to borrow the money from your father just to give legs to the Acorn story.
Yeah.
And you eventually paid your father back.
Yeah, and by the way, people describe me as a media mogul.
Yes,
at the tea parties. Ladies and gentlemen, media mogul Andrew Breitbart. And I think to myself, I flew in steerage in the middle seat to get to this tea party, and I have 2 car payments, one for a minivan, and a mortgage. Why is it? Why is it that Arianna Huffington gets $315 million for the Huffington Post for creating a liberal version of a liberal blog site that is a reflection of what already exists in the media, yet nobody's knocking down my doors when I created the Huffington Post? There's no money to be on the right. I am not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I want to change culture. I really do want to save the world.
Just cannot say you created the Huffington Post and leave it out there unless you explain that. What do you mean you created the Huffington Post?
I thought I would leave it as a little secret between Arianna and me.
You just put it out there, man, so you must explain it.
Arianna came to me after the 2004 election cycle and asked me to come up with an idea for a website. I had worked with her after I met Drudge as her lowly researcher. I will credit her for taking me from a slacker to a workaholic. Okay? I give her credit for that. But one day I walked into the office and she's now a liberal. Not sure how that happened, but one day I walked into the office and I pulled the ripcord and I was no longer in her life except seeing her at cocktail parties from time to time. 5 years later, she comes up to me after the election, says, do you have an idea for a website? We come up with the Huffington Post. We launch it in May. I've been working with her since December, about 6 months into it. A month into it, I realized I got to get out of here. I don't think I can hang out with all these lefties. They don't like me. The idea behind it for me is more voices, not less. I don't care if Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann are out there blabbering against conservatives. They're the ones that want me kicked off of ABC News, and they got me kicked off of ABC News on election night. I don't care. More voices, not less. And I told Ariana at the time, I said, Ariana, it'll be great for you. You'll be the queen of the left-wing blogosphere, and my side will have the best content in the entire world. Talk radio will be all over your Hollywood friends talking about how Bush is equal to Hitler. It was a win-win proposition. I stand by it. There was some of my signature mischief put into that. I thought this is a win-win situation. I still agree about it. Ariana made tens of millions of dollars, and I made the seed money that allowed for me to start my Breitbart.com, which was the flagship of my new media operation. And I take whatever money that I make from one site to create another site. I'm just a small businessman. I'm just a simple Tea Party guy who has a mortgage and 2 car payments.
What is at stake in this war you decided that you have to join?
I think everything.
What is everything?
Well, I think that America is everything. I think that America is a symbol to the rest of the world of freedom and liberty. We've mapped it out better than anyone else. Our Constitution is the modern Magna Carta. And I think that the left doesn't like it. It thinks of it as a living Constitution. If it's living, it means nothing. It means that, well, we're in 2011 and this is going on over here and this is going on there. It's anything that we want. If it's anything, then it's nothing. And the Tea Party movement is an existential movement. It goes beyond fiscal responsibility. It goes back to the basics. It goes away from Professor Michael Eric Dyson, where everything is malleable, everything is gray, and it goes back towards a black and white world. Not where there aren't any grays, but it goes back to where there is a right and wrong. It is going back to a place where Judeo-Christianity is the basic template for what this culture stands for. That's blasphemy to the left, because their multiculturalism believes, how dare you say that? Does that mean that you're against Hinduism? Listen to me, I'm agnostic, okay? But the proof is in the pudding. America, the pillar of capitalism, the pillar of Judeo-Christianity, they're checks and balances, they work off of each other. America rose so quickly to become what it was in a short period of time. And then the cultural Marxists came in here, took our institutions down. They got rid of Washington's birthday. They got rid of Lincoln's birthday. They got kids at their college campus saying, Mom, I love you. Thank you for buying me a stereo on the first day of...
And they want to take In God We Trust off our
currency. And by Thanksgiving in the first semester, why are we having Thanksgiving, Mom and Dad? You are an oppressor of the Native American. That is what the left is in this country. In the book, you will learn about critical theory. In the book, you will learn about Saul Alinsky translating critical theory down to the street level. Critical theory is tearing down our culture. Just criticizing. Sarah Palin is bad. Sarah Palin is bad. George Bush is bad. George Bush is bad. The war is bad. Barack Obama won the presidency after 4 years of the left arguing that the war is wrong. The war is wrong. The war is wrong. It's critical theory. It doesn't matter that once they got in, that they didn't stop the wars. It was an effective strategy of community organizing and community chanting to stop the war, to get Barack Obama in. Now that he's in, the war exists, and they're moving towards their utopia.
Yeah, I loved it when you talked about in your book, Zelensky giving his pointers on how to win. Your success is in the reaction of your enemies. Mm-hmm. You cannot go beyond your constituency. You got to go exactly where they are. You got to be humble. You got to be warm. All those fuzzy things that you talk about in your book. And you say the guy was a genius, and it worked. He was effective.
And he was entertaining.
Yes.
And, I mean, that is a really good read. And that is why, to this day, I look at the people who have motivated me and who have helped to craft me into the person that I am. which is a hybrid of journalism and provocateur and sometimes even an entertainer. I look at Hunter Thompson, I look at Abby Hoffman, and those people were granted wide berth by the left to become hybrids of journalism and truth-telling and entertainer. But when a person like Andrew Breitbart comes about, or a person like James O'Keefe comes about, no, you must exist within the box that we give you. You're only allowed to do this, and you must put that you're a conservative while you're doing it. Well, I'm not going to allow for the left to define me, to tell me what box to be in, and I hope that black people who are conservatives and Hispanics who are conservatives and women who are conservatives are inspired to realize we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take on our oppressors. There are oppressors. In the United States of America, you have a right to be a conservative if you're black. You no longer have the Democratic Party has the right to oppress you, to tell you that you do not have the right to think freely in the United States of America.
I would be remiss in the last 8 minutes of this wonderful time with you, and I appreciate your writing the book. What do you say to those kids at Tulane, South Carolina State, Howard, Harvard, Yale, the University of Tennessee, who are slacking, who are being manipulated, who are being used, who are not making the most of their college education, and one day they're going to wake up and say, I regret this. What do you say to them directly?
I do. A matter of fact, I'm glad you said that. I go to the Young America's Foundation. I go to college Republicans. I beg people, take me to your college campus. I am a provocateur. Your liberal classmates are going to like me. I'm going to put on a show for you. I want to tell them the story of what happened to me and how I had my awakening. And I want to tell them this. I said, this is the most exciting time in the world. I didn't have the internet when you were there. You have the ability to change history.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. Don't waste your education. Don't waste your time in college on nonsense.
Yeah, well,
don't allow yourself to be manipulated and brainwashed for somebody else's cause.
That's what I'm telling you is those video cameras are to be turned on the professor. You no longer have the ability now, teacher, to be in a math class telling your students that Bush is Hitler, that Palin is a dominionist, or going off topic and trying to indoctrinate kids. They now have the ability. If you don't like what your teacher's doing, if you think that your teacher's going off curriculum, if you think your teacher's trying to turn you into a Marxist, there's nothing wrong with the transparency of new media, because I guarantee you that even if it's a fifth grade teacher in social studies in Inland Empire in Riverside, California, you get that video of that teacher abusing the child's mind. That's new media, and I guarantee you that school district is going to be in a deep amount of trouble. We need to hold the academic world. We need to hold the teachers accountable for what they've been doing unchecked for too long.
It is obvious to me that you're a decent guy. You're very sincere. You mean well, and you really wrote this. You wrote this book. You poured your heart and soul into this book. You have a chance. You're talking to millions of people. What is it that you would like for them to know about you, Andrew Breitbart?
Well, you just said it, that I'm sincere about this.
Yes, you are.
That I'm not a liar, that I do this at great sacrifice and risk.
And that you're not a tool of the right.
I'm not a tool of the right. In fact, I say it. I helped Go Proud. I mean, I went into CPAC when people were saying, I don't want to be part of CPAC if Go Proud's going to be there. I'm like, I'm going to throw a party for these guys. I'm a Tea Party guy. I told the Republican establishment
What's the biggest myth about the Tea Party? You keep saying you're a Tea Party guy. Some people say, oh my God, the Tea Party.
Obviously, the biggest myth is that it's racist.
And it's not.
No, I believe I believe if black people who feel inside of the inner city or wherever they live, if they were just simply to walk to a Tea Party and just sit amongst people, be an actor. You know how to act. Go out there and shake people's hands. If you're skeptical of them, go out there and ask questions of them.
But the left doesn't want them to do that.
They don't want to, because they're so...
That would be their worst nightmare.
That's right. But that's what I want.
They want to tell them who they are.
Yes.
They don't want them to find out on their own.
This is what I want more than anything. This is my legacy. I dedicated that book to Clarence Thomas. I met Ginny Thomas. She came up to me and tapped... I've told this story more times. I've told it to everybody, and I was at an event in Washington, and I didn't know who this lady was who tapped me on the shoulder. And she just told me who she was, and it freaked me. I couldn't deal with it's huge. You have no idea what that man, meant to me. The stoicism that he had when he went through that. And I've gone through the Shirley Sherrod thing, and she said that I wanted to bring black people back to slavery on national TV, and not one journalist challenged her on that. When this is my life's most important thing, is to do something that no stupid white person would ever think to do, and that's stand up to Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and say enough, and to stand up to these people who prey upon people in need, people like Van Jones. I can't think of anything more cynical in the world than what Van Jones has done with his education. This guy graduated from Yale, and what did he do? He went to the inner city in Oakland, California. Did he teach these people in need how to fish? No. He organized around the cynical proposition that Mumia Abu-Jamal is on death row in Pennsylvania because he killed a white cop, or he didn't kill a white cop. Fomenting the rage, community organizing around the rage over a cop killer is as cynical as you can get. And he has used this hucksterism to rise through the ranks to become the next Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton has a history of bloodshed in the name of his own opportunism. And white people in this country are scared to death of being called a racist because they know they're going to be called a racist. I only have one life to live. I have 4 children. I want to leave a better country for them. I looked up into the sky and I said, I want something to do that isn't shallow, that's Hollywood sitcom crap. And the Clarence Thomas thing has been my guiding light throughout this entire thing. And, the media also didn't report that Niger and Roy Innis invited me to be the master of ceremonies to CORE, Congress of Racial Equality's Martin Luther King dinner. They're paying attention to what I'm doing. The mainstream media wants to ignore it because they're afraid that I'm going to be the Pied Piper who finds black conservatives at every Tea Party at 30.
In 1 minute, tell us who Media Matters are.
Media Matters is a George Soros-funded, John Podesta-led organization that isolates conservative media. It isolates Fox News. It isolates Andrew Breitbart and all of his websites, spends millions of dollars a year transcribing Channel 360 on DirecTV, Fox News, analyzes every single person that writes on my sites, issues press releases to every single newsroom saying, ignore this man, ignore this man, ignore this man, ignore this man.
You should be honored.
That tells you your success. It's the highlight of my, anyone that knows me, if you follow me on Twitter at Andrew Breitbart, one word, you will see one man who has chosen to obsess on, to draw attention to Media Matters and what they're doing and how evil it is. And I'm having the time of my life.
Just like when the Acorn decided to sue you. Oh, you said, oh my God.
Bring it on.
The heavens have opened.
Bring it on. Bring it on. I like the fight. I'm not sure if you can tell.
I must tell you, I really wish you well. I really want to encourage people to go out and buy Andrew Breitbart's book. It is Righteous Indignation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What is righteous indignation?
Righteous indignation is telling the mainstream media that we aren't motivated by negative things, that your critical theory against us, that the reason that we're scared, that we're only lashing out because we're scared, because we're racist and all those things. No, it's not just leftists in this country who right of center people and Tea Party people and people who are not part of the media elite also want to save the world, and that's what this book is about.
Think we have a chance at saving it?
I hope so. I'm a pretty cynical guy, but I wake up every day, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Listen, it has really been my pleasure today.
Thank
my
you.
honor that you wrote the book, and I got a chance to read, be empowered by it, to be charged again. My battery has been recharged. I'm energized. I talk about this book wherever I go. I encourage people to read it because, you know, you were speaking for me and so many other people in the world that can relate to what you've said. And you've become like a clarion call for so many people. Thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
And we really wish you much success in all your endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, C-SPAN. I'm Armstrong Williams, Andrew Breitbart.